South Sudan at risk of return to full-scale war, UN warns. Israeli attacks on police sites kill 6 in southern central Gaza. World reacts to eruption of fighting between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Epstein tried to buy a palace in Morocco days before his arrest in 2019. Good afternoon and welcome to The World in 30 Minutes on Politics and Business Television. I am Omike Joseph Matthew. Many thanks for joining us. Details of these stories and more coming up next, right after this. A United Nations investigative body has warned that South Sudan risks a return to full-scale war unless it can urgently put an end to entrenched impunity and widespread abuses amid escalating violence in the world's youngest country. The report by the UN's Commission on Human Rights in South Sudan, released on Friday at the Human Rights Council session in Geneva, found that civilians were enduring severe abuses, including killings and systematic sexual violence, arbitrary detention, forced displacement, and deprivation amid a deepening humanitarian crisis in one of the world's most impoverished countries. It said escalating atrocity risk and the collapse of political safeguards in the country made urgent preventive action imperative, calling on regional and international pressure, sanctions, and enforcing the UN arms embargo until concrete improvement in human rights and accountability are achieved. The report, drawing on a year of investigations and testimony, blamed the actions of political and military elites in detaining opposition leaders, eroding power sharing, and attempting to change the terms of the 2018 peace agreement for placing a peace framework in the country under major strain and increasing instability. It noted that the arrest and removal from office of First Vice President Riek Machar last year and his prosecution for murder, treason, and crimes against humanity had undermined the core power-sharing guarantees of the peace agreement and triggered political uncertainty and armed clashes on a scale not witnessed for decades. Machar, an ethnic Nuer, was suspended last year as South Sudan's number 2 after opposition Nuer White Army fighters overrun a military garrison in the town of Nasir. A civil war broke out in South Sudan in 2013, 2 years after gaining independence from Sudan, when President Salva Kiir, a member of the Dinka ethnic group, the country's largest, first dismissed Machar as vice president, accusing him of plotting a coup. The report also noted that intensifying military operations had been marked by a dangerous shift in tactics, including airstrikes on civilian-populated areas. Pakistan has said it is now in open war with Afghanistan's Taliban government as explosions were reported in Kabul and fighting continues in other locations along the border. Pakistan says it has also attacked Kandahar and Paktika inside Afghanistan. The declaration on Friday comes hours after Taliban spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid said Afghanistan was carrying out light-scale offensive operations against the Pakistani military along the Durand line, which separates the two countries. The Taliban said its attack was in response to a separate round of Pakistani airstrikes earlier this week. UN General Secretary Antonio Guterres is closely monitoring the situation, expressing deep concern over the surge in violence. In a statement delivered by his spokesperson, Stephen Dujarric, Guterres urged both nations to adhere strictly to their obligations under international law, with a specific emphasis on international humanitarian law. Guterres underscored the urgent need for both parties to prioritize the protection of civilians as confrontation continues. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, who has been involved in intensive talks with the United States to avert conflict engulfing his own nation, has urged the two countries to resolve their differences through dialogue and good neighborly principles, as he highlighted the significance of the holy month of Ramadan as a time for self-restraint and Islamic solidarity. Russia has urged the warring parties to halt cross-border attacks immediately and resolve their differences through diplomatic means. The RIA news agency reported on Friday, citing the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Russia has also offered to mediate if both sides agree. Beijing is deeply concerned over the escalating along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs said on Friday. China has been mediating the conflict through its channels. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Moa Ning said during a regular news conference. China is willing to play a constructive role in cooling the situation, she added. Britain's Foreign Secretary Yates Cooper posted on X that the UK is deeply concerned by the significant escalation in tensions between Afghanistan and Pakistan. We urge both sides to take immediate steps towards de-escalation, avoid further harms to civilians, and re-engage in mediated dialogue. In addition to blaming the Taliban for terrorism and instability within the country, Pakistan's Defense Minister Khwaja Asif says Islamabad made every effort, both directly and through friendly countries, to keep the situation stable. At least 6 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli drone attacks targeting 2 police posts in the Buraji refugee camp in the central Gaza Strip and the Al-Mawasi area in Khan Yunis in the south, as Israel presses on with its more than 2-year genocidal war on the devastated enclave. The attacks overnight into Friday were condemned by Hamas as undermining mediator efforts during a ceasefire phase that Israel has violated almost daily since October 10. Medical sources at Nassau Medical Complex in Khan Yunis reported the arrival of 4 bodies and several wounded individuals following an Israeli military strike on a police checkpoint at the Al-Maslak intersection in Al-Mawasi. The sources said that the strike occurred in an area outside the Israeli military's control and described the condition of some of the wounded as critical. In the central Gaza Strip, 2 Palestinians were killed and others were injured in a similar Israeli drone strike that targeted a police post at the entrance of the Buraj refugee camps. Hamas spokesperson Hazim Kwazim said that the rising number of deaths as a result of the ongoing Israeli bombardment across the Gaza Strip reflects the Zionist occupation's blatant disregard for the efforts of mediators and its complete disregard for the Peace Council and its role. A drone jammed by the Swedish military after being spotted near the French aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle in Malmö was probably Russian, according to Sweden's defense minister Paul Johnson. The French military said the drone was detected about 7 nautical miles from the carrier, which is visiting Sweden for the first time ahead of planned NATO exercises in the region. Johnson told Sweden's public broadcaster SVT that there was likely a strong link between the drone and a Russian naval vessel operating in Sweden's territorial waters in the Öresund Strait between Sweden and Denmark. It remains unclear what ultimately happened to the drone, though Johnson noted that the Russian ship later sailed on towards the Baltic Sea. The Kremlin swiftly rejected the allegation, with spokesman Dmitry Peskov describing claims of Russian involvement as absurd. The incident comes amid months of reported drone sighting near military installations and airports across several NATO member states, including Denmark and the Baltic countries. In December, authorities also launched an investigation after drones were spotted over Le Gille naval base in France, home to the country's nuclear ballistic submarines. Despite the latest episode, both Swedish and French armed forces downplayed its impact, with French officials stating that the swift response demonstrated Sweden's preparedness and did not disrupt the carrier's mission. Jeffrey Epstein attempted to purchase a multi-million-dollar palace in Morocco just 1 day before his arrest in 2019, according to documents released last month by the United States Department of Justice. Epstein had been pursuing the acquisition of the property known as the Ben Anakil since 2011, but negotiations were delayed for years due to disagreement over price and purchase terms. The palace, located in the upscale Palmyra district of Marrakesh, is described as an architectural masterpiece built by 1,300 craftsmen and adorned with intricate carvings and mosaics. On the 5th of July 2019, the day before his arrest, Epstein signed a $14.95 million wire transfer after agreeing to buy the offshore company that owned the property for 18 million euros. The Justice Department documents indicate that this was his last major financial transaction before he was arrested in New York on sex trafficking charges. 3 days later, his accountant, Richard Kahn, cancelled the transfer and the purchase was never completed. Morocco does not have an extradition treaty with the United States, leading to speculation in local media that Epstein may have viewed the property as a potential refuge if new charges were brought against him. However, a former associate speaking anonymously said the transaction suggested Epstein had no prior knowledge of his pending arrest, though it might have reflected a desire to secure a place where he could live like a king. The release files contain no evidence that Epstein discussed Morocco as a planned sanctuary from U.S. authorities. You're still watching The World in 30 Minutes live on Politics and Business Television. And still to come, Green Party taunts Labour in shock UK by-election victory. Do stay tuned, we'll be right back. Welcome back. A candidate for the United Kingdom's left-wing Green Party of England and Wales have won a closely watched by-election, dealing a significant blow to Prime Minister Keir Starmer's Labour Party in one of its long-standing strongholds. Official results released on Friday showed that Hannah Spencer, a 34-year-old councillor and plumber, secured in Colton and Denton, a constituency in Greater Manchester that had been held by Labour for nearly a century. In what analysts describe as a sign of growing fragmentation in the UK's traditional two-party system, the hard right Reform UK candidate finished in second place, while Labour, which had won more than half the vote in the constituency during the 2024 general election, slipped to third. The outcome marks a dramatic shift in voter sentiment in an area previously considered a safe Labour seat. The Green have increasingly positioned themselves as a progressive alternative to Labour, arguing that the governing party has drifted from its core values. Party figures, including leader Zach Polinsky, have been outspoken in their criticism of Israel's war in Gaza and in their support for Palestinians, a stance that has resonated with some voters dissatisfied with Labour's diplomatic position on the conflict. A court in India has dismissed a corruption charge against former Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal nearly 2 years after his arrest and months-long detention. Kejriwal, leader of the Aam Aadmi Party, was arrested in March 2024 over a liquor policy that authorities claimed unfairly benefited private retailers. On Friday, the court cleared him and 23 others, ruling that there was no overreaching conspiracy and criticized the Central Bureau of Investigation for a flawed investigation, recommending an internal inquiry. Following the verdict, Kejriwal broke down outside the court while speaking to journalists, with former Deputy Chief Minister Manish Sisodia embracing him. Sisodia and AAP spokesperson Sanjit Singh, who were also arrested in 2023, were among those cleared. All three leaders spent considerable time in jail, repeatedly denied bail by lower court before Supreme Court granted them relief. The CBI has said it plans to appeal the verdict. Venezuela's adopted president, Nicolas Maduro, has asked a United States judge to throw out the drug trafficking charges against him, accusing the U.S. government of undermining his constitutional rights to defend himself. In court filings on Thursday, Maduro's legal team argued that Washington has blocked the Venezuelan government from paying his and his wife's legal fees, interfering with his ability to retain counsel of his choice under the Sixth Amendment. Maduro and his wife, Cecilia Flores, have been held without bail in New York since they were seized by U.S. forces in a January raid and charged with drug trafficking and related offenses. His defense lawyer, Barry Ballock, told a Manhattan federal judge that this alleged interference with funding for legal counsel should lead to the dismissal of the case, and it blocks Maduro's ability to mount a proper defense. U.S. prosecutors allege that Maduro abused his power to aid drug traffickers and that Flores was a co-conspirator, charges the couple have denied. The request to dismiss the charges adds a new legal dimension to a high-profile case that has drawn intense international attention. And now to the African continent, at least 55 Ghanaians have been killed fighting in the war in Ukraine, with 2 others currently being held as prisoners of war. Ghana's Foreign Affairs Minister, Samuel Okudzito Ablakwa, has said. Speaking during a visit to Kiev, Ablakwa disclosed that about 272 Ghanaians are believed to have been drawn into the conflict since 2022, citing information from Ukrainian authorities. He described the figures as depressing and frightening, stressing that Ghana cannot turn a blind eye to these heartbreaking statistics. Although Kablakwa did not specify which side the Ghanaians were fighting for, Ukraine's foreign minister stated earlier this week that more than 1,700 individuals from 36 African countries had been recruited to fight for Russia. The 55 confirmed Ghanaian deaths represent the highest officially acknowledged casualty figure from a single African country in the Ukraine-Russian war. Media reports in Cameroon have claimed that 94 of its citizens have died in the conflict, though authorities there have not confirmed the figures. 2 South Africans, at least 1 Kenyan, have also reportedly lost their lives. Ablakwa emphasized that the casualty figures are not just numbers, but represent human lives and the hopes of many Ghanaian families. He said the government is committed to tracking and dismantling illegal recruitment networks operating on the dark web, as well as launching public awareness campaigns to prevent Ghanaians' youth from being lured into foreign conflicts.